Picture this: a bustling corporate event in downtown Los Angeles. Executives in tailored suits, champagne glasses clinking, and forced laughter echoing through the room. But what happened next would send shockwaves through social media and change lives forever. It was a moment that exposed the ugly truth about wealth, power, and human dignity. And Joe Rogan was there to witness it all. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Joe recalls, his voice filled with disgust. This guy in his $10,000 suit, literally laughing at a maintenance worker who was just trying to clean up a spill. The worker, James Martinez, a 47-year-old father of three, had accidentally knocked over a drink while maintaining the venue's floors. That's when tech CEO Maxwell Richardson decided to turn it into his personal entertainment. "Look at this pathetic display," Richardson sneered, pulling out his phone to record. "This is why some people will always be at the bottom. They can't even walk straight." The room fell silent. Uncomfortable glances were exchanged, but nobody moved. Nobody except Joe Rogan. "Hey, what's your net worth?" Joe asked Richardson, stepping forward. "Because I guarantee you it's not worth as much as this man's dignity." The CEO's smirk vanished. But Joe wasn't done. "You know what's truly pathetic? Thinking your bank account makes you superior. This man wakes up every day, works hard, and provides for his family. What do? Mock people who make your cushy life possible." Richardson tried to laugh it off, but his face had turned pale. "It was just a joke." "No," Joe fired back. "A joke is funny. This is just sand. And everyone in this room knows it." What happened next left the entire crowd stunned. Joe walked over to James, put his arm around his shoulder, and said something that would go viral within hours. "The measure of a person isn't in their wallet. It's in how they treat others. And right now, the richest guy in the room is the one with the mop in his hands." The story of that night began long before the champagne started flowing. James Martinez had been working at the Criterion Event Center for 15 years, quietly building a reputation as the most reliable member of the maintenance staff. His journey to that position hadn't been easy. After immigrating from Mexico 2 decades earlier, he'd worked countless odd jobs, learning English during his lunch breaks and sending whatever money he could spare back to his family. The Criterion job had been his big break: steady work, benefits, and the chance to build a life for his growing family in America. His colleagues knew him as the guy who would cover their shifts when their kids were sick, who remembered everyone's birthdays, and who never complained about the late hours or demanding clients. Maria, the head of housekeeping, often said James was the glue that held their team together. "He's got this way about him," she'd explain. "No matter how tough things get, he finds a way to make everyone smile." That evening, the Criterion was hosting the annual Tech Innovation Summit, a gathering of Silicon Valley's elite, where companies showcased their latest breakthroughs. The event had been months in the planning, with every detail scrutinized by a team of high-powered event coordinators. James had been on his feet since 5 a.m., ensuring every detail was perfect. The marble floors gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, and even the brass fixtures had been polished to a mirror shine. This wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about pride in his work, about showing his children that any job done well was worthy of respect. Maxwell Richardson, CEO of Quantum Tech Solutions, had arrived fashionably late, already 3 glasses deep into his expensive champagne. His entrance had caused the usual stir: photographers snapping pictures, junior executives jockeying for position, hoping to catch his eye. His company had just secured a billion-dollar deal, acquiring a promising AI startup in a move that had made headlines across the tech world. He was riding high on the kind of arrogance that only comes with believing you're untouchable. Few knew that behind his success lay a trail of burned bridges and crushed competitors. His own employees referred to him as the Terminator for his cold-blooded approach to layoffs, and rumors circulated about his habit of buying up smaller companies just to shut them down and eliminate competition. The press painted him as a visionary, but those who worked closely with him saw a different picture: a man who'd lost touch with the human cost of his success. Richardson's rise to power was a story Silicon Valley loved to tell: the self-made billionaire who'd started coding in his garage. What those stories left out were the 3 developers who'd helped build his first successful app: only to be pushed out before the company went public. Or the countless small businesses his aggressive tactics had destroyed. Success had hardened him, turning early ambition into ruthless determination. Joe Rogan hadn't planned on attending the event. He'd been recording a podcast nearby with a guest who mentioned the summit, and Joe, ever curious about new technology, decided to stop by. His arrival had caused a subtle shift in the room's energy. Here was someone who couldn't be bought, who'd built his career on calling out bullshit wherever he found it. He'd arrived just minutes before the incident, his presence barely noticed among the sea of tech celebrities and venture capitalists. The spill happened during a lull in the evening's presentations. A guest had abandoned their champagne glass on an unstable cocktail table, and as James moved to clear it, his cleaning cart bumped the table leg. The glass toppled, its contents spreading across the immaculate floor like a slow-motion disaster. In that moment, two worlds collided: the invisible world of service workers and the glittering sphere of tech billionaires. James immediately reached for his supplies, his movements quick and professional. He'd handled countless spills before. It was a routine part of the job. But for James, this wasn't just another cleanup. His mind was elsewhere, still processing the news he'd received that morning at the hospital. His youngest daughter, Sophia, had just started another round of aggressive chemotherapy in her battle against leukemia. The doctors were optimistic, but the treatment costs were mounting, even with insurance. Richardson, looking for entertainment, saw an opportunity to perform for his entourage. The alcohol had loosened his tongue, but the cruelty in his words came from a deeper place, a fundamental belief in his own superiority. The CEO's mockery started with snide comments, each one louder than the last. "Hey everyone, watch this. It's like a nature documentary about the working class in their natural habitat." His followers laughed on cue, their sycophantic chuckles echoing through the space. What Richardson didn't know was that James had spent the morning in the hospital with Sophia, going straight from the oncology ward to work, knowing he couldn't afford to miss a shift. Every dollar went toward Sophia's treatment, and his employee health insurance was the only thing keeping the family from complete financial ruin. As he knelt to clean the spill, James thought of Sophia's courage during her treatments, how she never complained even when the pain was at its worst. Her strength was what kept him going, what made moments like this bearable. As Richardson continued his taunting, pulling out his phone to record the entertainment, the room's atmosphere shifted. The other guests, many of them self-made entrepreneurs who remembered their own humble beginnings, grew visibly uncomfortable. A few looked away in shame, while others busied themselves with their phones, pretending not to notice. The silence of the crowd spoke volumes about the invisible walls between social classes, the unspoken rules that kept people in their assigned places. Among those watching was Sarah Chan, a prominent venture capitalist known for her emphasis on ethical investment. She'd crossed paths with Richardson before, declining to invest in quantum tech due to concerns about their business practices. As she watched the scene unfold, her hand tightened around her champagne glass, her own immigrant parents' struggles playing through her mind. That's when Joe Rogan stepped in. Having built his career on authenticity and straight talk, he couldn't stomach the display of casual cruelty. His intervention wasn't just about defending James. It was about confronting the kind of entitled behavior that he'd seen poisoning society. Joe had seen too many people use their wealth as a shield, hiding behind their money while treating others as less than human. The confrontation that followed became more than just a viral moment. It became a symbol of resistance against the dehumanizing aspects of modern capitalism. Joe's words, delivered with the same raw honesty that had made his podcast a cultural phenomenon, cut through the artificial politeness of the corporate event. When he walked over to James and put his arm around his shoulder, it was a gesture that bridged worlds, that reminded everyone watching that dignity isn't something that can be bought or sold. After Joe's powerful words silenced the room, the evening took an unexpected turn. Sarah Chan approached James with her business card, her voice steady but her eyes bright with purpose. "My firm has been looking to invest in facilities management startups," she said. "Someone with your experience and work ethic. We should talk. Real change happens from the ground up, and I think you understand that better than most." The video of the confrontation, captured by multiple guests on their phones, spread across social media platforms like wildfire. Hashtag dignity over dollars started trending within hours, with millions sharing their own stories of workplace humiliation and class discrimination. The raw authenticity of the moment, the way Joe's words had cut through the pretense, the visible shame on Richardson's face, the quiet dignity of James throughout, struck a chord with people across the social spectrum. Major news networks picked up the story, leading to broader discussions about wealth inequality and corporate culture. Commentators analyzed the incident from every angle. Some praised Joe's intervention as a needed wake-up call, while others defended Richardson's right to joke around. But the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict, and the consequences were swift. Richardson's board of directors called an emergency meeting the following morning. The company's stock had taken a hit as customers and partners distanced themselves from the toxic publicity. Within 48 hours, Richardson was forced to step down, his resignation accompanied by a carefully worded apology that fooled no one. The incident became a case study in how quickly reputational damage could bring down even the most powerful executives. But the real story was what happened in the weeks that followed. Joe invited James to appear on his podcast, creating one of the most watched episodes in the show's history. James shared his family's struggle with Sophia's illness, his voice breaking as he described working double shifts to afford her medications. The episode struck a chord with viewers, prompting an outpouring of support and the creation of a fundraising campaign for pediatric cancer research. During the podcast, James revealed more about his journey, the years of hard work, the sacrifices his family had made, the dreams he still held for his children's future. "I've never wanted handouts," he explained, "just the chance to work with dignity, to show my kids that honest work matters." His words resonated with millions who saw their own struggles reflected in his story. Sarah Chun made good on her interest, working with James to develop a worker-owned facilities management company that would prioritize fair wages and dignity in the workplace. The company, aptly named Ground Level, became a model for ethical business practices in the service industry. Chen's investment firm provided not just capital, but mentorship and connections, helping James navigate the transition from employee to entrepreneur. Ground Level's business model was revolutionary in its simplicity, treating workers with respect, paying living wages, and giving employees a stake in the company's success. The company quickly gained contracts from businesses eager to demonstrate their commitment to ethical labor practices. Within its first year, Ground Level had expanded to 3 major cities, proving that profitability and worker dignity could go hand in hand. Sophia's story touched hearts across the country. Medical professionals reached out offering specialized treatment options, and a major children's hospital accepted her into an innovative treatment program. Today, she's in remission, her recovery becoming a symbol of hope for other families fighting similar battles. The Martinez family established a foundation to help other working families facing medical crises, turning their personal struggle into a mission to help others. The incident sparked a movement within the tech industry itself. Several major companies revised their vendor policies, requiring fair labor practices and respect for service workers. Employee training programs began incorporating modules on workplace dignity and class sensitivity. The ripple effects reached far beyond that one evening at the Criterion, touching lives and changing policies across the corporate landscape. Joe Rogan continued to follow James's journey, featuring updates on his podcast and using the story to illustrate larger points about human dignity and social responsibility. What happened that night wasn't just about one rich guy being a jerk, he explained to his millions of listeners. It was about all of us deciding what kind of world we want to live in. Sometimes it takes seeing something ugly to remind us of what's beautiful, our capacity to stand up for each other, to choose dignity over dollars. A year later, James returned to the Tech Innovation Summit, this time as a speaker. Standing at the podium in a suit, though not a $10,000 one, he addressed a packed room about the importance of treating every worker with respect. The applause he received lasted longer than any product launch that day. His speech, titled Dignity at Ground Level, became required viewing in corporate training programs across the country. The story even reached the halls of Congress, where it was cited during hearings on workplace harassment and labor rights. Legislation was proposed to strengthen protections for service workers and increase penalties for workplace harassment based on social class. While the political process moved slowly, the cultural impact was immediate and lasting. Maxwell Richardson's journey took an unexpected turn as well. The public humiliation and loss of his position led to a period of deep reflection. He began volunteering at a local community center, working alongside the kind of people he once mocked. While some questioned his sincerity, others saw it as proof that change is possible, even in the most unlikely cases. In a rare interview months later, he admitted, "I had to lose everything to remember what really matters." The security footage from that night still plays occasionally on social media, usually accompanied by Joe's words about human dignity. It's become a teaching tool in business schools, a case study in how not to lead, and a reminder that character reveals itself in how we treat those who can do nothing for us. The moment has been analyzed in countless articles and documentaries, each finding new layers of meaning in that simple act of standing up for what's right. James Martinez still works at ground level, though now he's the CEO. The company has expanded to multiple states, earning recognition for its innovative approach to worker ownership and workplace dignity. Every new employee receives a card with the words that changed everything. The measure of a person isn't in their wallet, it's in how they treat others. The company's success has inspired similar ventures across the country, creating a network of businesses committed to ethical labor practices. Sophia, now cancer-free, started a youth program for children of service workers, helping them navigate the challenges of growing up in families where every dollar matters. She often tells her father's story, not focusing on the humiliation, but on the moment when someone finally stood up and said enough. Her program has helped hundreds of young people find their voice and pursue their dreams, turning adversity into opportunity. The incident became more than just a viral moment or a feel-good story. It became a catalyst for real change, a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up for what's right. In boardrooms and break rooms across the country, people began to think twice about how they treat others, regardless of their position or paycheck. The ripple effects continued to spread, touching lives in ways that no one could have predicted on that fateful evening. Joe Rogan still mentions that night occasionally on his podcast, usually when discussing broader social issues. "You know what the craziest thing is?" he'll say. "It wasn't about wealth or status or any of that. It was about remembering our shared humanity. And once you see that, you can't unsee it." His words continue to resonate with millions of listeners, reminding them of their power to affect change in their own communities. The story continues to resonate because it touches something fundamental about human dignity and the choices we make in moments of truth. It reminds us that change doesn't always come from grand gestures or planned movements. Sometimes it comes from simply refusing to stay silent in the face of injustice. The incident has become a reference point in discussions about workplace culture, social responsibility, and the role of influential voices in shaping public discourse. As for that gleaming floor at the Criterion Event Center, is still being maintained with pride and professionalism. But now, thanks to ground level's policies, the workers who keep it shining are treated with the respect they've always deserved. The venue itself has become a symbol of transformation, hosting regular events focused on corporate social responsibility and ethical business practices. Because sometimes, all it takes is one voice to remind us of who we really are, and what we can become when we stand together. This is more than just a story about Joe Rogan exposing a rich man's cruelty. It's about the moment we all decided enough was enough, and that's a change worth fighting for. In the end, the true measure of the story's impact isn't in viral views or policy changes. It's in the countless small moments of dignity and respect that now play out in workplaces across the country. It's in the maintenance worker who holds their head high, the executive who learns humility, and the ordinary people who find the courage to speak up when they witness injustice. The legacy of that night continues to grow, inspiring new generations to question the status quo and stand up for what's right. It's a reminder that in a world often divided by wealth and status, our shared humanity remains our strongest bond. The reverberations of that confrontation reached beyond American shores. International media picked up the story, sparking similar movements in countries grappling with their own class divides. From London to Singapore, Workers began sharing their experiences, and corporate leaders were forced to confront their own biases. The phrase, "pulling a Richardson," became shorthand for entitled behavior, while doing a Rogan meant standing up for someone who couldn't defend themselves. The impact on workplace culture was particularly profound in the tech sector. Companies that had long treated their service staff as invisible began implementing new policies. Security guards were invited to company meetings. Cafeteria workers received profit-sharing benefits. Cleaning staff were given name badges and introduced at company gatherings. These changes, while seemingly small, represented a fundamental shift in how corporations viewed their entire workforce. Joe's podcast episode featuring James became required listening in business schools and corporate training programs. Management consultants used it to illustrate the importance of emotional intelligence and servant leadership. The incident even inspired a best-selling book, The Dignity Factor, which explored how treating workers with respect actually improved bottom-line results. Ground-level success story became a case study in sustainable business practices. The company's worker-owned model proved so successful that several Fortune 500 companies began exploring similar structures. James was invited to speak at economic forums, sharing his vision of a business world where profit and human dignity weren't mutually exclusive. Sophia's youth program expanded into a national network, supporting children from working-class families with educational resources and mentorship opportunities. The program, named Rising Together, partnered with major universities to provide scholarships for service workers' children. Sophia herself became a powerful advocate for healthcare reform, testifying before Congress about the challenges facing working families dealing with serious illnesses. The incident also sparked a broader cultural conversation about social media's role in accountability. The viral spread of the video demonstrated how technology could expose and combat workplace abuse. Digital platforms became spaces where similar stories could be shared and support networks could form. The hashtag Dignity Over Dollars evolved into a movement, with people using it to highlight both injustices and positive changes in their workplaces. Maxwell Richardson's transformation became its own compelling narrative. After his initial period of volunteer work, he started a foundation focused on bridging the gap between corporate leadership and frontline workers. The foundation sponsored programs that required executives to spend time doing entry-level jobs in their own companies. While some saw it as reputation management, the impact of these programs was undeniable. As Joe would say, that's the real revolution. Not in storming the gates, but in remembering our humanity, one interaction at a time. The truth of these words continues to resonate, reminding us that the most powerful changes often start with a single moment of courage. When someone decides to stand up and say, "This is not okay," the story lives on, not just as a viral video or a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the power of human dignity and the courage to defend it. In break rooms and boardrooms, in classrooms and living rooms, people continue to share this story because it speaks to something fundamental about who we are and who we aspire to be. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that in a world increasingly divided by wealth and status, our capacity for empathy and our courage to stand up for one another remain our most valuable assets. The measure of our society isn't in our technological advances or our stock market gains, but in how we treat each other, especially those who make our comfortable lives possible. As we move forward, facing new challenges and changes in our world, this story serves as a reminder that the most meaningful transformations often begin with a simple act of human decency. And standing up for dignity that night, Joe Rogan didn't just change one life. He helped spark a movement that continues to grow, touching lives and transforming workplaces in ways that remind us all of our shared humanity and our collective responsibility to stand up for what's right. The ripple effects of that evening touched education as well. Universities began incorporating the incident into their business ethics curricula, using it to illustrate the real-world implications of corporate culture and social responsibility. Students in MBA programs were challenged to consider how they would handle similar situations, leading to rich discussions about leadership, privilege, and moral courage in the modern workplace. James's story became the subject of a documentary series exploring the invisible barriers that separate social classes in America. The series, titled Dignity: The Hidden Story, featured interviews with service workers across the country, each sharing their own experiences of workplace discrimination and the small acts of resistance that helped them maintain their dignity. Perhaps most significantly, the incident sparked a broader discussion about the role of influencers and public figures in social change. Joe Rogan's intervention demonstrated how those with platforms could use their influence to challenge systemic inequities. Other celebrities and public figures began speaking out more boldly about workplace justice issues, creating a cascade effect that amplified marginalized voices. The Criterion Event Center itself underwent a transformation. Under new management, it instituted a dignity-first policy that set new standards for how service staff should be treated at high-profile events. The venue became known as a place where workers and guests alike were treated with equal respect, proving that luxury and human dignity could coexist seamlessly. This story continues to evolve, touching new lives and inspiring fresh conversations about what it means to treat all people with the dignity they deserve. It stands as a testament to the power of individual courage and collective action, reminding us that real change is possible when we choose to stand up for what's right, regardless of the cost. As Joe Rogan often reminds his listeners, the true measure of a society isn't found in its technological achievements or economic indicators, but in how it treats its most vulnerable members. Through this lens, the events of that night weren't just about one confrontation. They were about redefining success in terms of human dignity rather than dollar signs. The story's impact reached into unexpected places. Labor unions began using it in organizing campaigns, pointing to how one moment of solidarity could spark lasting change. Corporate boards started including dignity metrics in their ESG reports, measuring how companies treated their service staff and contractors. Even popular culture was affected, with several TV shows and films incorporating similar storylines about workplace dignity and class consciousness. Looking back, that evening at the Criterion Event Center was more than just a viral moment or a feel-good story about standing up to a bully. It was a catalyst that forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the invisible barriers that divide us. But more importantly, it showed how those barriers could be broken down through simple acts of human decency and courage. The incident became a reference point in discussions about corporate responsibility and human dignity. Business schools now use it as a case study in ethical leadership and crisis management. The phrase "Criterion moment" entered the lexicon, describing that pivotal instant when someone chooses to stand up against injustice, regardless of the personal cost. James Martinez's story continued to inspire others. Ground Level expanded internationally, with offices opening in Europe and Asia. The company's success proved that ethical business practices and profitability could go hand in hand. Each new office maintained the same principles: worker ownership, fair wages, and absolute respect for human dignity. Sophia's recovery became a symbol of hope for other families facing similar challenges. Her youth program, Rising Together, partnered with medical institutions to provide support for children of service workers battling serious illnesses. The program's success led to the creation of a national network of support centers, each dedicated to helping working families navigate the healthcare system while maintaining their dignity. Joe Rogan's podcast continued to feature updates on the story's impact, with guests ranging from labor activists to corporate leaders discussing the changing nature of workplace relationships. The original episode featuring James became the most downloaded in the show's history, its message resonating with listeners around the world. Today, when people share this story, they're not just talking about Joe Rogan, James Martinez, or even the transformed Maxwell Richardson. They're talking about a moment that reminded us all of our shared humanity and our power to create change. In a world that often seems divided beyond repair, this story continues to offer hope that dignity, respect, and human connection can still triumph over cynicism and greed. Perhaps the most profound legacy of that night wasn't in the policies it changed or the movements it inspired, but in the countless personal transformations it sparked. People began to notice the invisible workers in their own lives, the cleaners, the security guards, the maintenance staff, and recognize their fundamental humanity. Small acts of acknowledgement and respect became common. Learning names, making eye contact, showing genuine appreciation. 5 years after the incident, the Criterion Event Center hosted a special anniversary gathering. James Martinez, now a successful CEO, stood at the same spot where he had once knelt to clean a spill. At this time, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Joe Rogan, Sophia, now a healthy teenager, Sarah Chan, and even Maxwell Richardson, who had become an advocate for corporate responsibility. Together, they unveiled a plaque commemorating that fateful night, inscribed with the words that changed everything. The measure of a person isn't in their wallet. It's in how they treat others. And so the legacy lives on, not just in viral videos or corporate policies, but in the countless small acts of courage and kindness it continues to inspire. Because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say, "This isn't right." In that moment, they remind us all of who we can be at our best. And that's a reminder worth fighting for. The story ends where it began, with a simple truth about human dignity and the courage to defend it. But its impact continues to ripple outward, touching new lives and inspiring fresh conversations about what it means to treat all people with the respect they deserve. In boardrooms and break rooms, in classrooms and living rooms, people continue to share the story because it speaks to something fundamental about who we are and who we aspire to be. In the end, what happened that night at the Criterion wasn't just about exposing one rich man's cruelty or celebrating one person's courage. It was about rediscovering our shared humanity and our collective power to create change. It was about remembering that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the dignity we afford to every human being. As Joe Rogan said in a recent podcast, reflecting on that transformative night, "You never know when your moment will come, at that instant when you have to choose between staying silent and standing up for what's right. But when it does come, remember this: every time someone stands up for dignity, they stand up for all of us. And that's how real change happens. One courageous moment at a time."